Hi, this is Bill Boggs, and today we look at the world of rock music. So much a part of our culture, but where is it headed? And how are rock videos changing the business? Who's hot and who's not? Today we talk about that and more with the following guests. John Sykes, who is VP of Production and Promotion for MTV. Charles Mitchell, who's a Vice President of Programs on the East Coast for RCA Video Discs. Richard Fields, who co-represents Pat Benatar, among other projects. Clive Davis, who is president of Arista Records, and Carlos De Jesus, who is program director and on the air with WKTU-FM. Well, we are going to have, I think, an exciting program with a lot of music, which it's funny, we talk about so many things on Midday. We have not had a really solid discussion about rock music, which, as I said, is so much a part of our culture, in a long time. And I think, Richard, let me ask you, why is this a particularly good time to be talking about rock music?
Oh, I think it's an exciting time to talk about rock music. I think that the conversation that we're about to have here today, we could not have 18 months, 2 years ago. I think the industry has gone through a very difficult transition, probably has come out healthier because of it. There have been a lot of problems on a worldwide basis having to do with recessions and counterfeiting and bootlegging and all of these things that we've had to deal with in the music business. I think that is on a negative side. On the positive side, what we have had to deal with in a very positive way is all of the music shows, and MTV and Carlos's show and the show that had just premiered on NBC. So it's very exciting.
That's what I really want to
opportunity.
Lead off with a question. What do you think, Clive Davis? I mean, you've been in the music business for a good part of your life, adult and probably otherwise. How is MTV and how are rock videos changing the music business?
I think the most important contribution that was made came at a time when radio, on whom we were almost totally dependent, was in a very conservative period, and just playing old records, playing the War Horses, playing the endless cut of Led Zeppelin, and you would come with new artists, you would come with new sounds and artists who had something to say, and you could not get exposure. And along came MTV and built an audience because there was this latent interest in the public in new artists, in new sounds, in new music, and exposed the music that otherwise was not getting exposure really on the traditional source of that we tried to get into. And you found that records started selling, demand was being created, that there was an impact from this exposure, and that helped.
John Sykes, you've been with MTV since before MTV was on the air, right?
Right. Four of us in a room with no windows.
Four people in a room looking at the walls. For the benefit of people who really have heard about MTV, don't have the service, quickly define it. What's it like?
Well, MTV is the world's first video music channel that runs in stereo 24 hours a day. I think the quickest analogy I could draw would be to radio. MTV is like a progressive radio station with a screen. We saw AOR break in the late 60s, early 70s.
AOR is?
Album-oriented rock radio break in the early 60s, late 70s. I'm sorry, late 60s, early 70s. MTV really, much like AOR, is breaking now in the 80s. We saw stereo go hand in hand with a new form of music in the late 60s. Now a new form of music is really joined together with cable television here in the 80s.
What do you mean? Does anyone at this point jump in?
The only thing I would add to that, though, the only thing I would add to that, though, is that it's definitely geared towards rock radio. It is like radio, but it's a little one-dimensional. And this is not considered a put-down. This is just stating what I see and what many other people see. So it's basically like rock radio on TV, and I think it's good. And I think it had a lot of other positive effects. I could sit here and put MTV down like crazy, but that's not the reason I would like to talk to you about. I think that it had a lot of positive effects outside of that. It created opportunities for ABC to say, wow, this is happening with rock. Why don't we try it?
Yeah, you're now hosting a show for WABC TV.
Yeah, so MTV also had like a positive effect, you know, by denying to play, which I understand. You guys were positioning yourself in a certain position, just like radio stations are rock, or they're jazz, or they're country, or they're disco. That's fine. Right. That's the way it should be. You shouldn't terribly confuse the audience. But what it did in a positive effect is that it made people think. It made people say, wow, if it's working for MTV, maybe it could work for jazz, maybe it could work for disco.
Well, but that's, you know, that's on a business level. The other thing that MTV did, which is very exciting, is that it has allowed the artist to grow. Because within the confines of a record, you have a very limited amount of time. And what MTV has done now through the use of a collaboration between artists, and now very exciting directors and producers have come into the picture.
So
and
like
writers.
little movies.
Yes. You're doing little movies. It is allowing artists to interpret, to grow, and therefore when they attach another project, they're going to look at it differently.
It's another
it's been
area.
an opening up process.
It's another area of visual style that also allows a lot of artists that have been in the business for a long time to expand into a new territory. I think of one of Clive's acts, Ray Davies, or the Kinks.
We'll be seeing the Kinks later in the show.
Many writers, songwriters can expand into this area because they've been telling stories all along in the audio medium, and they can reach out now into the visual areas of expression.
I want to show one. I think
it's very important.
There are people who have not seen the service, they've not seen your show, they haven't seen the new NBC show, they hear talk, they read articles. Let's actually look at a couple here. We have, you supplied this Roman Holiday. Just tell us a little bit about the group.
Well, this is a brand new group from England, and they're getting into a different side, fusing different kinds of music, principally swing and rock together. And they're getting very popular here, and I must say that the first exposure we got on the record was really through John Sykes and MTV. And it did create an interest in a group that might otherwise have been difficult, as I said before, to get exposure on.
Well, let's just one thing to note before Clive rolls it. It was one of those exciting things, and it reminded me of the old days of radio, where we were sitting in the office, and all of a sudden the cart of videos
comes in instead of
a record, and we're putting all the videos in, and all of a sudden, boom, this band Roman Holiday. And all of us are excited about music. We like to see new music break. And we saw this band, and said, "Wait, play it again." And I called Les Garland, pulled him in the office, and Bob Pittman pulled in, and they all came around. And by about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, an hour after the video came in, we had 12 people in the office playing the video over and over again, saying, "These guys are great." And it was just like the old excitement.
That's exciting. Will catch on to the viewers.
That's
exciting.
It
will go to the VJs, and then it will catch on to the viewers, and it will help Clive break an act that he may not have been able to break before.
I think Clive's opening statement is one we'll be coming back to as long as we're talking about this. It's a whole new way of exposing music. Let's look at this. Roman Holiday, currently very hot on MTV and Arista Records. Roll it, if you will, Jim Jackson.
I smile. You know they couldn't handle anything you're laying down. It's the fact you put the snapping crocodile. You send me crazy when you say, "Look out, you're gonna spend our day in bed." My heart went out of style. I get scared inside when you stand by.
Okay, I'm sorry for the fluttering. It's a technical problem. Hopefully we had it corrected because we're taping the show. We're not live right now. If we didn't, I apologize. But even with that, it looks good and it sounds good. Now, how did this come into your life, Clive? How did you hear the music? Which came first, the pictures or the music?
In this case of this group?
Yeah.
No, I was very fortunate here. This is an English group that I got the rights to through a distribution deal that I have with a very enterprising, creative young man named Clive Calder, and so that group is on his label, Jive Records in England, and I have the exclusive right to get that artist here in America.
Good. Let me take a pause for commercial. We'll come back, and after this commercial, how far do you think MTV is going to go? How far will rock videos go? And what are we going to be seeing on the tube musically in, say, the next 3 or 4 years? Let's talk about that. We'll be back right after this. All right, no, we have not changed channels. This is still WNEW-TV. That was, what do you call that at MTV? That's top of the hour?
That's called the top of the hour ID. That's to let everyone know that it's somewhere around the top of the hour. Just to let our audience know also
so you
what
can
they're
get out of bed and go in the other room.
Get up and even watch
your other
hours,
TV set.
take your job, put it back up, and walk around the house.
How far is all this going to go? I mean, you started with one AOR kind of music. What do you think we're going to be seeing 5 years from now in terms of music on TV? And in the homes.
And in the homes. I think you'll see something happen to television, cable television specifically. I think you'll see what happened with radio happen to television. You'll see certain channels evolve that satisfy specific needs that the audience wants. Mass appeal television will always work, just like U.S. News and World Report, Time, Newsweek are around as magazines, but there will be specific channels that serve special needs.
MTV. What will happen now with competition? I mean, now you have this competition. Do you think it's going to be too much to kill off a good thing? I mean, like late night concerts, you found there used to be a midnight special, then Donnie Kirshner came in, and there was a way that somehow, in splitting audiences up, there was a common denominator reach that was that became unattractive for everybody. Do you feel this competition could hurt?
I don't think that we'll feel fragmentation as a result of these shows that have come on, because they are in fact shows. They have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And when the show is over, what do? Well, you'll turn on MTV, or if you have MTV, hopefully you're watching MTV anyway. The key thing is MTV is really a service. It's a channel. It's there 24 hours a day. And whether you work 9 to 5, 5 to 11, 11 to 3, you can always come home and click MTV will be there. You don't have to schedule your day around the television. The television schedules its day around your lifestyle.
That's really, I think, one of the reasons why it works, because up to now, television always programmed you. In other words, you had to deal with what was on TV.
Want to see the news,
you be there at 7
o'clock, 10 o'clock.
Yeah. Now, with cable television services like MTV, with video cassettes and video discs, the viewer has more control over what he or she watches, when they want to watch it. To know that you can go at any particular time of day, 24 hours a day, to MTV, or you can pop in a cassette or a disc at any given moment, gives the viewer a lot more control, and I think it makes it more attractive. It makes the decision-making process more creative anyway for the viewer.
I think the other thing it's going to do is it's going to expand the base. Shows like Carlos's and the shows that are the show that just premiered on Channel 4 and NBC, it's just going to expand it. It's going to make a whole audience base that wouldn't necessarily watch MTV aware of the acts.
Can a bad video, suppose you've got a great song and the artist is not yet in gear with the right director, the right conceptual person for the video. Can a bad video hurt a really good song?
I think it can. I think it can. I think it can hurt an artist. I think it could hurt an artist by one of two ways. One, outright hurting the artist and killing the song. But I think that it could also probably not let them capitalize upon how good it could have been. In other words, you have a potential for something to be terrific.
It's like a bad ad.
And if you lose that potential, you're really in trouble.
It's like a bad ad for any product. I mean,
Absolutely
there's a big correlation between, I mean, what MTV is doing in a lot of ways is advertising records in an extended form. So if you have a bad video and you create a negative impression of that record through that video, it can really hurt you.
Well, I think a lot of it, though, depends on how you're programming your particular video show. For example, MTV, I know, is in their programming style, they do play new groups, which is cool. Our particular show, we're a lot more hit-oriented. So the record is already made before we play it. So the video, if it's bad, is not going to hurt our record because it already sold 100,000 or whatever. The only thing the video could do is help sell more.
Right.
But the way we program, the record already sold its possible maximum because we're playing hit records in our particular format, urban, contemporary, whatever you want to call it, black, disco, whatever. Now I think with MTV it's probably a little different because you're in the process of breaking new groups. So if that new group has a record out that's so-so and then it has a bad video, then that's bad.
Don't forget what they're up against. They're up against, you could have a new group that's come in and they're starting now for the first time and they don't have all the tools available to them, and they're up against a production that cost $100,000 with the best directors and everybody else. And all the audience is just exposed to one after another.
Exactly.
And it has a major negative impact on it.
And it's important to point out that because we expose so much, we almost position ourselves as the gallery. Where the viewers walk in and they decide whether they like something or not. I remember the frustration of walking into a radio station. I was in the record business before I moved into video, and going to Rockford, Illinois, and have a program director say, "I'm sorry, it's overproduced." Overproduced. I mean, you know, Tom Werman just spent, 6 months of his life, a band has spent all his time.
There's nothing you can do about it.
He's like, sorry, it's overproduced.
But overproduction can really sap the energy out of rock and roll.
But what I meant was, or underproduced or whatever, what I meant was value judgments being made. I mean, you've got the KTUs of the world that are breaking new music, and you move to certain types of new music. At MTV, we want the viewer to make the decision as to what works. And getting back also to the visuals, the really strong visuals can help a band. I think a good video can make a good song great, but a good video can't make a bad song good.
The music is still
the
king.
music
Yeah.
is the key.
I want to look at the, you brought a Pat Benatar video,
right.
right?
That's
Just
right.
before we get into it, what are you trying to do with this?
Well, I think Pat is a good example of an artist who is involved in every aspect of her life. She now has an opportunity to take the song and expand upon it, and she selects a director. In the case of her future videos, Rick and I are producing them, and we work as a collaborative effort to try to take that and interpret it to another level. And you go through the pre-production meetings as if you were doing a movie or a commercial, and what comes out of it is either a concept that you're very excited about, or you may decide, in the case of the video that you open the show with, Bill, is that sometimes just a straightforward concert-type shot is the strongest thing, rather than the conceptual way to go.
There are no rules.
There are no rules in it. And you take an artist like Pat, and sometimes there is such power when she's performing that you say, well, let's just do the song flat out. And you put the band in front of a backdrop similar to this, and you just capture it.
Let's watch. I don't know whether this is the first one or the second one, but it's going to be Pat Benatar, and I like to watch her. She could be sitting in a restaurant, ordering to watch her. Roll this. Well, there is Pat Benatar. One of the assets you have is a very attractive performer.
Dynamic.
Dynamic performer.
Really
dynamic. In a very attractive body. I would say, I want to ask this.
So you go with your strengths.
Yeah.
And in that case, we just went letting the viewers see the strength of Pat in the band.
As if they had a great
also stretch the point on
Oh,
concept
that's an
sometimes. I mean,
important thing
sometimes
to say.
a great
That's
song doesn't really lend itself to a conceptual treatment. You can over-literalize it, or you can really get corny with it. In that case, sometimes a well-shot performance video serves you much better.
How are these rock... when I say as if the viewer has the best seat.
Because what this has done now is in the past you'd have a band and they'd come into the United States, and now they have to get exposure, and or you start with a startup band that is a local band, and you go and you play the clubs for a couple of years, and you're out there and you're suffering and you're starving, and now through the videos, I'm not saying you won't necessarily have to go the route of the clubs, but you've accelerated the process. Millions and millions and millions of people can see Clive's new band immediately, over and over again, and see a front row seat to it. That's exactly what happens.
Points that I think that I just want to make for your listening audience, okay, your viewing audience, is that they could misinterpret all of this talk. I think it should be put in some context, because for the last year and a half or 2 years, those of us in the record business have had to deal with the problem as to whether the oral disc is a thing of the past, and whether audio-visual
as something you would
is
buy.
something which will supplant, as something that you would buy.
Yeah.
The tremendous value to those of us in music is the exposure that we get for our records. One of the problems, as I see it, is that the wonderful thing about music that you have is that your imagination can change every time you hear a song, depending upon what your mood is and what your feelings are. And when you fix a concept to a song and you do keep repeating it, it does fix the imagination, and the song is limited to that one interpretation, as you say.
Point. The life of the song,
therefore,
maybe.
Not only is this not competitive, and not only is it really promotional as far as we're concerned, but your audience should never feel that the future of records is in the oral disc or tape, and that the imagination, every time that when you hear a song or a record, you could think different things, and you could, it's so much more open, and the imagination can roam free, so that I just want to put this in context, really.
I had to break for commercial. We'll come back with your point, Chuck, right after this. We'll be right back. All right, we're going to be seeing a rock clip of Freeze in this segment, but Chuck mentioned we're about to make a point about what Clive Davis was saying.
I just wanted to say, as somebody who, works for a video disc company and who's concerned with, actually retailing this stuff, that believes that MTV and that shows like it are creating a retail taste for this, that none of us would presume to ever think, no matter how many players we get out there, that the video disc would ever replace the audio disc. I mean, that's a ridiculous notion. What we're offering is in a sense an augmentation to the audio disc. People are going to be buying records forever and using their imaginations and creating their own pictures with audio music for as long as we live. But what we're trying to do is create one sub-segment or one facet of the overall musical picture, which is that area of visual music, wherein there are a lot of different places you can go. I think of films like, classic films like Casablanca, for instance, which create an atmosphere that you really, despite the fact that it limits your imagination to one visual sense of a place called Casablanca in a specific time, you can look at over and over again because
that's different. When you have
there's a rich.
You ever go to the real Casablanca?
Right.
Big disappointment.
Right.
But also, it's in color. It's not in black and white.
You do better to watch the movie.
It's also important to note that a good video will utilize visuals that can expand the imagination. You can watch Hungry Like the Wolf by Duran Duran over and over again. Every time in Roman Holiday there's something you pick out. Hopefully a good video will trigger the imagination. Some of the poorer videos limit the imagination, therefore they will quote unquote burn out quicker. But we found that there are many, many more videos being produced today that can actually trigger the imagination. What video does is it offers the artist another level to express his or her music or his or her thoughts. It's up to that artist to either limit the imagination or expand the imagination.
Well, that's the same thing that records used to do to people, though. I mean, I don't know about you, but I've listened to a lot of records where I heard one thing once, then upon listening to it 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 times, there's always some subtlety. A cowbell that you didn't hear, or a conga break, or somebody else.
Let's get abstract for a second.
So the only difference with visual, though, is that it's appealing to another sense. Records deals with ears.
What about poetry? A song is a poem, and music is put to that.
Well, it depends on the song.
What I'm saying, no, I'm agreeing with you. What I'm saying is, what music does, it adds another sense. It adds.
Ozzy Osbourne is no poet.
I'm sure they all relate to something.
But he's popular. One last thing on this. Well, not a last thing, but how do you think the visualization that we've been talking about, I think this is interesting, how is it affecting live concert presentations? Group sets out, like Bowie is an interesting example. I saw him at Madison Square Garden last week, and it was, at certain times, like watching a very theatrical rock video. Now, are we going to see more and more things affected in live performance because of the impact of MTV and other shows?
I think so far it really hasn't done so. I think that Bowie really has moved the form a little further in the sense that he's a very gifted, unique, original artist in his own right and has a sense of the pictorial, which is quite unique. And so therefore I did notice at the Garden that he did use his backup band in a visual way and sort of used them as surrounding background performers and slowed them up in slow motion and then speeded them up thereafter. Thus far, I don't think. I think that it's a medium unto itself, and I don't think that it's likely. I mean, the clever, imaginative artist, I think, will be spurred on to use, as he should, or she should, or they should, the stage in a pictorial form. But I don't think, I think they're separate media.
Carlos, we have a clip from your show. By the way, when is your show on? It's Friday night?
Channel 7, Friday nights at 12:30 until 1 o'clock, and in a couple of weeks we'll be simulcasting on WKTU.
What kind of music are you going to be playing?
What kind of music will we be playing? We're pretty localized. We're into New York, and we're trying to be very mass appeal. We're trying to be almost like a top 40 type of a video show. But we will be leaning towards the streets of New York. For example, the video clip that we're going to show now happens to be the #1 12-inch selling in New York City. It's a hot record. It's sold close to 100,000 already. So we figure that somebody out there must like it. So that's why we need a show like this to expose that kind of music.
Okay, and the group is? Okay,
the group is from England. It was produced by a guy from New York, Arthur Baker, who's very hot. I'm sure you guys probably haven't heard of him. But he sells a lot of records. A lot of records. I'd like to own his bank account. This is on Streetwise, and it's a very, very hot record. It's the biggest record in the city, in Manhattan, you know, Queens, Brooklyn.
Okay.
That's the deal.
All right, that is Freeze, IOU, and can be seen on your show, which is, what you say, 12:30 to 2?
12:30 to 2, yeah.
On Channel 7.
Channel 7.
I want to just shift it out, because we've got people here who really love the business they're in, and they are top-notch at what they do, and ask you some things that I think our viewers might be wondering about. What kinds of acts should not play free concerts in the park? I don't mean to be negative in my thinking, but you're hip in the music business. What kind of, who do you say should not play a free concert in the park, John?
Well, it's...
Name one act you'd think there'd be trouble afterwards.
I mean, to answer this question would really, as a representative for MTV, it would be a little bit out of line to answer it, because I have my own personal views versus what MTV would say about that. Probably want to talk about it. I just think, you know, there's just the sense of putting together. Anytime you put that many people in one place, anything can happen.
I'm not saying musically. I just mean as an event.
I think that's the point. I think when you attract young people, any artist is going to bring out a large group of young people is going to have problems, because the young people are the ones with the worst habits. Adults know how to maybe have a drink or two and control themselves. Young people are into bad habits. They have a couple of beers or whatever. They get out of hand. They get cocky. And you're talking about 400,000 people. I think, be them white, black, Latin, or Martians, you're going to have problems because it's crowd control. And you only have 15,000 cops.
I don't think it has. I agree with Carlos. I don't think it has to do with the act. I think it has to do with the control of the crowd. The morning of the Diana Ross concert, which is what you're alluding to, I happened to have been jogging in there with my wife, and we saw at 7:30 in the morning a group that hit that area up at the ball field that looked like they were juiced up and really looking for trouble.
And that was the morning.
That was 7:30 in the morning. They should have been taken care of. That is not the overwhelming number of people that had been there to see it. It had to do with the control. It does not have to do with the act.
You know what else?
If you have a problem with Diana Ross, what are you?
Well, that's really what I'm saying. I love
that.
Like
12 hours in the sun.
Right.
They can't move to go to the bathroom because they'll lose their spot.
Right.
I mean, there's a lot of problems like that.
Well, but you're making it sound as though there should not be. The answer is there should be concerts in the park.
Oh, definitely.
And the answer is that there should be concerts in the park that appeal to young people as well as the Lawrence Well crowd.
I think for everybody, yeah. Music is for everybody.
And to the extent that the basic issue is that no small minority segment should create this kind of a problem for the majority of people, because everybody wants free concerts in the park, really.
Yeah, I mean, and it's certainly, I mean, just in my own view, I don't think this is on any level a racial thing. I think you could have a heavy metal concert in the park that I would go to Newark to avoid the park.
And I think we all could name a few groups who we think might cause that problem.
But it's not. I really believe it's a facilities problem. And I believe it's a control problem of the crowd, and I don't think it has to do with the act. I agree with Clive.
It does have to do with the act. You would not want a heavy metal group playing concert at the park, because you know that there could be problems from a heavy metal group, that they may be there probably is a relationship through market research study to do with sex and violence and heavy metal and harder rock.
But you had the problems with Diana Ross.
Right. You didn't have the problem with Simon and Garfunkel.
You didn't have the problem with Elton
John.
You don't have it with the Metropolitan.
You didn't have it with James Taylor. So
you got a different audience.
On a practical level, you're going to make certain.
But that's why I asked the question.
Yeah.
What kinds of acts would you really have to be, if I'll defer to you, what kinds of acts do you really have to be extremely careful with? And you say acts that attract young people, maybe a heavy metal act.
Real young kids are harder to control in that kind of a
I mean, look at St. Patrick's Day. There's not even any act involved in that.
It's a very, see, that's the thing. It's a very subjective call there. I don't think any of us are Houdini here who could say, okay, this will have a problem. We could make an educated guess. The second day of the US Festival made us very nervous. MTV was out there with camera crews covering this event, and you had, there must have been 8 heavy metal groups. I mean, these huge groups that alone attract a very tough crowd. And we had visions of a Judas Priest fan confronting a Scorpions fan in the parking lot saying, my group's better than yours, and what would happen. But the control at the US Festival was
quite a vision, John.
Rock and roll gang.
I know, I thought about that, Bill. But no, it was at a point where the control out there was really set up well, and nothing happened. So there's no rule.
Let me take a pause for a commercial. We'll come back. I want to ask one question. How long can the Rolling Stones go on? We'll get to that and a lot else on our rock special. We'll be right back. All right, we're back. We'll be looking more at the Eurythmics tape during this segment. That was shot for RCA Video, specifically for home distribution, right?
Right. Well, it'll also be shown on cable television, but we'll have different forums for TV exploitation and then for the home video. We can get into that if you want.
Well, you know what I'd like to do is, I just one quick question about the Stones. It's one of my favorite groups. How long do you think the Stones will be going on? Do you think 20 years from now, if they, they're still alive and well, they're going to be belting out music? And I mean this because rock audiences are getting older. We've got big rock fans in their 50s, and
well, part of the rock audience is getting older.
Yeah, there's a new generation.
There's a new generation.
Well, but their longevity doesn't depend on the age of their audience, because if you go to a Stones concert, you'll see kids, they're from elementary school and high school, and a lot of it is voluntary on their part. And a lot because they're the pioneering or among the pioneering artists who are staying. It will be very interesting to see, because credibility is a factor, and their strength has always been their rawness and their toughness and their questioning tradition and pushing the role back. So the question is, with certain lyrics, how they can be believable after a certain age. But right now, they're good for at least another 5 or 10 years.
We do have great rock musicians who are up in age. I mean, if one thinks of Fats Domino, Chuck Berry, Jerry Lee, I don't know how old Jerry Lee Lewis is. He's probably not.
Well, but they're not in the forefront of the charts, okay?
No, so but they're performing.
What you're really saying is, how long can they stay on top? Right. And how long can they, are they willing to try to stay on top?
Yeah, it's interesting, the Stones were one of the first groups to give us their videos. The Who and the Rolling Stones were like in line at the front door. They were the ones who survived the 60s to 70s transition also, the top 40 to album-oriented rock. And when we were starting MTV and we asked for the videos, I said, yeah, we've got a ton of these. Yeah. We'd love to try this. I mean, Mick Jagger was so excited about it because, as Clive mentioned, they're the innovators, they're the survivors. And they'll be around for the next however many years.
Instead of getting stale, they're looking to push it to the next level.
Right. As Mick is doing now with his, he's doing those fantasies, I think, on one of
Jerry
the
Hall. I
mean, that's right. Exactly right. They're doing something on pay television. They're doing these children's fantasies.
Oh, fairy tale theater.
Which is really
exciting. Shelley Duvall. It's a good idea.
It's a wonderful idea. Now, I mean, I have a son 11 and a half years old who is becoming a Rolling Stones fan. Now, I don't have to tell you that before he was born, the rest of us were Rolling Stones fans. It's really exciting. And I think that I agree with Clive as to what their credibility is having to do with the lyrics, but they'll just keep going.
If you go to the concerts of the Grateful Dead or the Kinks or the Rolling Stones, you will find that they have a tremendously young audience. I mean, filled with high school kids who have heard the records or...
They're legendary.
Absolutely.
They really
My 17-year-old sister is a bona fide Kinks fanatic, and I am too. I'm 28, and I look at her and say, I remember when Ray Davis, and my older sister is a Kinks fan too. I mean, it's just amazing how the longevity, the real survivors have.
Of course, they're still contemporary though. If you're happening at any given time, it doesn't really matter who you are.
They've kept the energy. They all have kept the energy, but there's so much depth there. There's so much. You go back to the old records, you go on to the new records. There's a consistent level of depth and integrity, plus the energy of rock and roll. They don't get stale, they're still fresh.
It's not dated. I mean, you can listen to it and it's fresh and it's exciting. You want it's today.
Who were some others? Who would you say, if you had to, the top few really innovative, inventive, influential people, groups working in rock today? Probably just quickly.
I would definitely have to mention Stevie Wonder.
Stevie Wonder.
I think Stevie Wonder is somebody who a lot of people wait for his album to come out. I think a group out of Germany called Kraftwerk is a group that a lot of people listen to. They're very electronic and rock oriented. I think groups like Kraftwerk are groups that contributed a lot in bringing rock and black music together, because they use kind of both elements. They're dance music, but it's also rock, it's also electronic. So those are two of the groups that
Clive, who would you say? I just want to go quickly on this one.
Well, certainly those that are analyzed, Bowie is at the top, or very close to
Right
the top.
now
The fact that he moves and is a trendsetter and original and moving into different concepts. I happen to think, when people talk, Michael Jackson, I think that the importance and the value of entertainment and the fact of the individual appeal of a song, so often you get into more philosophic attitudes towards rock and roll, but what Michael Jackson is doing and bringing record sales back to the 10 million mark, I mean, that's
There's nobody really hotter than him now.
No,
is there? I mean, really?
No.
As a performer, as a dancer, as a figure on stage, as someone selling records?
And that is probably the best current example of where a tremendous video, a succession and continuity of hit records has propelled a performer to the forefront right now.
We were looking at the Michael Jackson video just yesterday over at the office, and it looked to all of us, it was the 1983 version of West Side Story.
Oh, definitely.
It was there, and it's part of the excitement of him as a performer. I agree with you, Michael.
What were you going to say, John?
I was going to say I agree 100% Michael Jackson, David Bowie, but also you have to look at a band like The Police. What they have done, they've mixed together so many different influences, to form something that I'm sure is affecting the Eurythmics and all these groups that are breaking out of Europe right now. And to look at Every Breath She Takes, the video, with the cuts and the shots and what they did with that. And in fact, they also came out with an album compilation, which had a whole look of the Synchronicity LP in front of the record, which was a piece of art. I think Jerry Kramer produced it. And they're really experimental. They've had a lot of videos also along with Bowie.
Good performers, too. Now, I said we were going to have the Eurythmics tape. This is not something that was made for MTV. This is a home video product. This is an RCA video disc, which you cannot pull out. You've got to have a video player to put it in.
Well, you could do it, but
you slide the thing in. Just tell us a little bit about the audience for something like this. They've got to have the equipment at home to play it, right?
Well, you have to have a video disc player to play a video disc on, and but we're involved in creating full-length programming that people hopefully will buy and own and want to play again and again, or at least think they'll want to play it enough times to justify the purchase in the first place. So we're involved in spending a little bit more money for longer form programming. We can't, although we're trying to get together compilations of videos that you see on MTV, the best of videos that you would see on MTV or the other shows. That's one form that a video disc could take. It's really a full-length situation. So RCA Records UK signed a band called the Eurythmics several months ago, and they shot to the top of the British charts, which in and of itself is not unusual because a lot of bands shoot to the top of the British charts and then you don't hear about them the next year. But we got an incredible buzz both from the people at RCA Records, people outside the company, and we decided to take a chance on a group that hadn't yet broken or even been seen or heard in the United States. We went over to London and we shot a live concert that we're going to mix with MTV-style conceptual videos to actually do a concert conceptualized program.
Right,
and this is the part of the live.
This is part of it. It's Eurythmics. It's an RCA video disc. Jim, roll it, please.
Esta es la casa. Este es el cielo. Esta es la historia. Y salgo chiquitita. This is the house
you see the Eurythmics. That's an RCA video disc, and is it still a work in progress at this point? I mean, that's the finished part there. But
it'll be finished and done in another 2 or 3 weeks.
It's exciting.
Well, I think people may be saying, well, gee, why would you want to have something at home? How often would you want to watch it? You know, if you had this RCA video disc, you know?
I think the answer to that depends on how good the work is. That it's unreasonable to assume, whether you're talking about movies or whether you're talking about music videos.
Same thing applies to buying a movie,
sure. The same thing I think applies to buying a hardcover book, which runs you about the same amount of money, or for that matter, a record. Although it's a lot less money.
Yeah.
The implication must be that you like something well enough to want to own it and use it over and over again.
Well,
and
but with the record, you could just put it on and it's background music sometimes. It
right.
could be playing while you're doing other things.
But we offer these things in stereo as well, so, and the music stuff especially takes on an ambient quality, just like you can put MTV on in stereo in your house and go about your business. You don't have to sit in front of the television set all the time. You can also pop in a video disc, and if you want to do something else, you're still going to hear it in stereo loud and blasting through your house.
It's important to note that music creates a mood, whereas conventional movies and television programs are really set for plot. And once you've seen Catch-22 a few times, perhaps you don't want to watch it again. But every time you flick in that Fleetwood Mac concert, perhaps it's going to trigger different things. And in fact, you invite people to come on over and you'll play a video. Music is repeatable. It creates a mood, whereas the others are much more plot-oriented.
If we create the videos, the images that match the music in richness, or I mean, really it's an intangible quality. There's no science to it. That we don't know. We can't put it on a sheet of paper and run it through a computer and get out what we need. It's the creative element that's going to make it work.
Does all this? Let me turn back to Clive for a second. Does all this mean now, Clive, who you've seen plenty of acts and shepherded the careers of many acts through successful albums, that it's harder for an act to break in today? That it's just even yet another degree more complicated?
No, what this means is that it's easier to break a new act today than
to break in, to get a deal with you, or to get a
well, when I say break in, I thought you meant break out, in the sense that break.
No, I mean just get started. Just get started.
I would say about 3 years ago, there were so few new American artists that were breaking, and indeed, even currently, there seems to be much more creativity coming from England, and these things go in cycles. But most of the new artists that are breaking today really are coming from England or outside the United States. But today, because new artists might have 50% of the top 30 of the best-selling charts, that you know that the future of your company is dependent upon the success you're going to have with new artists. Usually with great fanfare and press and publicity, you read about big banking deals, you know, of certain major artists that are signed, but those historically have turned out the most unprofitable. And the sustenance of a company, the health of a company, the success of a company is really determined by the new artists that you could sign in a given year. So I think that there's a healthy appetite now that's pretty widespread in the music business, with the revival of the business, with the rhythm that we feel out there. That you will take your risk, you will sign your new artists, and much more so than the last 5 years.
We have a video of Steve Forbert. Tell us a little about, is he at this point? I am not familiar with his career.
Well, he's at a point right now where Clive is talking about. Yeah. He's a young artist. He has just moved over to Columbia Records from another record company. He has a new record that will be out near the end of the year. They're going into the studio now. Probably actually with the same producer that has produced Pat, Neil Giraldo. And Steve has had records out. He's had some success, not as much success as everybody would hope for, but there is a buzz in the industry about this man as a songwriter. He is a songwriter, and he writes American-type songs, as he likes to say. He is really a roots American. Unlike the influence that's coming over now from England, this man is really, he's a Southerner. He came to New York several years ago. He's been living and working out of New York City. And we feel, as do people at radio and CBS, that he is about to make it. This is his album. Right. The video that you're going to see, interestingly enough, we did for him last year, because we felt, contrary to the conceptual videos, we felt that with Steve Forbert, people should get to know something about the man. And since he is so articulate, we put him together with the Maysles brothers, who had done Gimme Shelter for the
wonderful
Stones.
filmmakers.
They spent some time with him. What you're going to see is an excerpt of Steve talking about himself and his music, which is far more believable than anything else. And
okay, this is Steve Forbert. Let's take a look.
I can feel a new expression on my face. I can feel a strange sensation taking place. I can hear the guitars playing lovely tunes every time that you walk in the room. I close my eyes for a second and pretend it's me you want. Meanwhile, I try not to act so nonchalant. I see a summer night with a magic moon. Every time that you walk in the room.
On the record. All right, just an addendum to this. That wasn't the spot we thought that you thought was queued up. That was actually shot on a bus.
it was shot on a tour bus by the Maysles. That was part of what they did. They are really very talented at getting in and out of tight places, as they have done in the past. But had we seen that segment that we thought we were going to, you would have seen Steve talking about what his desires were and what his goals were, and it was very compelling.
We'll take a break and come back with your old friends, the Kinks.
Yes.
Right after this. We'll be right back.
They put a parking lot on a piece of land where the supermarket used to stand. Before that they put up a bowling alley on the side. They put a parking lot on a piece of land where the supermarket used to stand. Before that they put up a bowling
The Kinks have been working for 20 years in the rock and roll business. We have, I think, an excellent video. I was looking at this in the office today. But before we get into it, would you want your children to be rock and roll artists? For all of you. I mean, you hear so much about life in the fast lane. We're all in the business. What do you think about it?
Listen, life is what you make it, and it depends upon, if you ask, if your child is talented, and if your child is creative, musical,
all things being equal, would you want that life that you've seen so many people, you know, from Janis Joplin all the way down the line have?
Well, you don't judge a career by the pitfalls that the person has to face. I think you judge it really by the talent and by the bent of the person and the personality and the gifts and the talents. I think that the problems that you face is that certain young people, before they're ready to know what to do with it, have notoriety and affluence and recognition and celebrity and vulnerability and fear as to what's going to happen if they lose that success. So these are very complicated. It's like saying, do you want your child to be an actor or an actress? I mean, look what happened to Judy Garland, and look what happened to Marilyn Monroe. But it's the same profession. Look, you're in front of the camera.
There's not a, listen, I'd love to be a rock and roll artist. You know? It's not a negative intended. I just think it's interesting for people to hear so many people who are on the outside of the business can't conceive of their children or their cousins really being up there on stage with people screaming and hollering. So I thought we'd just talk about it.
Because usually they're very different off camera, and usually a new persona comes on when they come on camera, and it's an entirely different
it's like an alter ego type of thing.
It's another way of expressing yourself. You get in a lot of trouble as a parent, fixing something in your mind that you do or you don't want your child to become.
You've got a little baby at home.
Considering you have a newborn child, what will...
18 months?
I mean, what I would say to her in anything that she would do was, if you want to be a musician, I mean, if that's really important to you and you have musical talent, do it. Yeah. And if it would, especially if it would kill you not to do it, you know, follow the muse.
Why aren't there more really first-rate big female rock stars and musicians? Why is it so male-dominated? I mean, you got Pat Benatar as co-manager, but for the most part, it's not. Why aren't there more women in the business?
It's a male-dominated business. There isn't any question about it.
Look at this. It's a male-dominated
Well, rock and roll is male, and the exciting thing about Pat is that she has been able to break through that barrier. I'm not saying that other artists haven't been able to do that, but she's done it on a level that no other female artist has done.
Even as musicians,
no, it's rock and roll is going back back to the early days of what the Rolling Stones were saying and the Kinks and all, it was male and
But I think
all
there
of
are
the
more women
connotations.
in
Oh, there are more now than ever.
They're building.
But it has been male. And you take a look at you take a look at the personnel in record companies. You take a look at it right down the line, and it's been mainly
It's just
male.
society. We're male oriented. That's my personal opinion. But in most things,
Lisa Robinson, by the way, was invited and scheduled to be on the show who was ill, so there was going to be a woman. Not that I felt we needed a token woman, but I think I would have liked to have her view. She's a knowledgeable person. Tell us, before we get into the Kinks, tell us one tiny little bitty Kinks remembrance that you have, Clive. Not Kinks. It doesn't have to be kinky.
Again, it's a matter of impression. Let me tell you,
Yeah, just one
Ray
fleeting-
Davies is, because it's hard to pick a memento, but Ray Davies is, he's a thoughtful, bright, literate, cultured man who is terribly knowledgeable about theater, and yet when I speak to him, and if you and I were sitting here with him, I mean, he would be so knowledgeable to talk about acting and theater and film and music and the roots of it. And then when you see him get on that stage and that demonic grin comes on his face, and to see him, what he does with kids of all ages to come to see a King's concert, it's another persona coming out on there, really. Basically, he's very shy, and basically he's very inward as well in his own private life, so that there's no public personal anecdote that you could see, other than the fact that after every concert, you can be assured that there'll be a major fight between him and his brother as to the standards of excellence. And you come back, and without question, I have to wait a minimum of 15 to 20 minutes until they settle all the problems that came out of that one stage performance out of that year. And what that shows, what that shows is this, if I might to broaden, is 2 points. One is, I signed 3 that have probably been around for the same length of time. One of the Kinks, and 2 are Aretha Franklin and Dionne Warwick, all of whom are very successful today. And the one common criterion is that they were hungry and are still hungry for success and perfection and to be #1. And that's what you look to in that kind of artist, so that the Kinks are as hungry today as they ever were, and they want to achieve success, and they love music and they feel it, and it's part of their soul.
Well, and here in a new incarnation, 20 years down the line, is an excellent rock video, I think, with the Kinks.
They put a parking lot on a piece of land where the supermarket used to stand. Before that they put up a bowling alley on the site that used to be the local pally. That's where the big bands used to come and play. My sister went there on a Saturday. Come dancing, all her boyfriends used to come and call. Why not come dancing? It's only natural. Another Saturday, another date. She would be ready, but she'd always make him wait in the hallway in anticipation. He didn't know the night would end up in frustration. He'd end up blowing all his wages for the week, or for a cuddle and a peck on the cheek. Come dancing, that's how they did it when I was just a kid. And when they said come dancing, my sister always did.